Ramon Novarro took a bold step, leaving behind his idyllic childhood in Mexico, a place he affectionately referred to as the Garden of Eden, to venture into the perilous streets of Los Angeles. With his good looks, athleticism, charm, and undeniable talent, he seemed destined for greatness. By the late 1920s, he had risen to become MGM's leading man, yet, as quickly as he ascended, his fame dwindled, and he fell into obscurity, turning to alcohol for solace. Then, one day, a staff member arrived at Ramon's home to uncover a harrowing scene. This is the captivating tale of Ramon Novarro's meteoric rise and tragic fall. In 1895, the Samaniego family celebrated the arrival of their first child in the Garden of Eden. Dr. Mariano Samaniego and his wife, Leonor Perez Gavilan, named their son Emilio, and over the years, the family grew to include 12 more siblings. Ramon, born on February 6, 1899, was among them. During that era, Mexico faced high rates of infant and child mortality, making him the eldest surviving male by his first birthday. Although he was given an impressive 14 names, he opted for the simpler Ramon Gil Samaniego as he matured. Ramon's older sisters took on the role of caregivers for their younger siblings, while Leonor looked after him. Their shared love for music and theater forged a strong bond, prompting Leonor to enroll Ramon in music lessons. His mother, dreaming of a future as a concert pianist, began teaching him piano when he was just 6 years old. This musical journey soon expanded to vocal training, allowing him to perform in church choirs. At 6, Ramon made his debut performance alongside his sister Guadalupe at their grandmother's birthday party, reciting a poem about an illiterate girl seeking help to write a letter to her beloved. The applause fueled his passion, leading him to host puppet shows in a marionette theater gifted by his mother on his 8th birthday. In the Samaniego household, religious devotion and family ties were inseparable. Each night, the children knelt for their mother's blessing, a Catholic ritual that elevated parents to a saintly status. These nightly rituals instilled a profound sense of Catholic guilt in Ramon. Herbert Howe, who would later become Ramon's publicist and romantic partner, remarked on the family's emotional distance. Compliments were scarce, and gratitude was typically directed only toward God. The tranquil life of the Samaniego family in their own little paradise came crashing down in the early 1910s. This decade wasn't kind to them, marked by 2 major setbacks. Dr. Samaniego, still in his early 40s, began suffering from facial neuralgia, which caused sudden, excruciating pain on the right side of his face. His surgeries led to the removal of some facial nerves, ultimately resulting in significant damage to his optical nerves. This unfortunate turn of events forced him to abandon his dental practice and pivot to teaching English at the Institute of Z. However, the loss of his dental income hit the family hard financially. With Ramon, the eldest child, just entering his teenage years, he was too young to lend any monetary support. The year 1910 also ignited the Mexican Revolution, sparked by the controversial defeat of landowner Francisco I. Madero in the presidential elections that summer. After fleeing to the United States, Madero initiated a rebellion against Porfirio Díaz's regime, which eventually crumbled months later. Even after Díaz resigned and fled to Paris, the chaos continued, with various factions battling for control. By May 1911, bandits and rebels, mostly dispossessed peasants, began attacking the town. As members of the urban upper class, the Samaniegos were in serious danger and decided to flee to Mexico City, which had regained some stability. Living with wealthy relatives there, the children were able to continue their education. Ramon enrolled in the prestigious Instituto Científico de México, founded by Jesuit priests. At 14, Ramon thrived in this new environment, receiving military training, excelling in athletics, and becoming a star on the track team. He balanced his intense physical training with studies in music, French, and English. By spring 1915, the family had returned to Durango as the revolution began to settle down. Now 16, Ramon had transformed into a rebellious young man. However, inspired by his sisters, who chose the path of nuns, he began to consider a religious life. Looking back on this time, he humorously recalled his youthful desire to die a martyr and be canonized. He adopted a strict regimen of fasting, slept on the floor without blankets, took on servant chores, woke up at 5 a.m., and maintained a humble demeanor, keeping his eyes lowered as a sign of devotion. This pious behavior drew the ridicule of local kids, who would tease him with a song about Maria whenever they spotted him, mocking his overly zealous religious attitude. However, his dreams of martyrdom quickly faded when he discovered a newfound love for opera. His aspirations for the priesthood took a back seat after he stumbled upon an old advertisement for a Mexican opera featuring Enrico Caruso and Geraldine Ferrar in Manon. He was also captivated by the then incomplete Palacio de Bellas Artes during his time in the capital. Recalling his impressions for Screenland magazine in 1929, he described Mexico City's opera house as a stunning temple of music, rivaling the grandeur of the Paris Opera. The lavish costumes, impressive sets, and the glamorous world of opera pulled him away from the austere life he had considered in a monastery. He later mused that perhaps it was temptation at play, admitting he still wasn't entirely sure it wasn't. In September 1916, 17-year-old Ramon and his brother Mariano boarded a train heading north to Texas. Their journey took an unexpected turn when the train stopped in the small town of Escalon due to a destroyed bridge ahead. Soon after, they discovered that the bridge to Durango had also collapsed. For 2 days, they survived on dry tortillas, beans, and questionable water, while Ramon anxiously worried about the possibility of a raid by the notorious rebel leader Pancho Villa, which he feared could lead to a gruesome fate, definitely not ideal for someone dreaming of a music career. Just when hope seemed lost, a train from Torreon arrived, bringing workers to repair the bridge. However, doubting the quality of the repairs, Ramon opted to trek back to Durango on foot with Mariano. Upon their return, Leonor interpreted the bridge's collapse as a sign from above, suggesting they should remain home. Ramon, however, countered that perhaps it was merely a test of their resolve. Determined to prove to both God and his mother that his destiny lay to the north, Ramon set off again, this time with $100 in gold coins. Mariano and a friend, traveling through Monterrey and Piedras Negras. After navigating immigration procedures that included a physical examination, a bath, and disinfection, they safely reached Eagle Pass, Texas. They then headed to El Paso to reconnect with relatives, but without informing their parents, the brothers ventured further west, as Ramon was intent on pursuing his show business dreams in Los Angeles. The family wasn't exactly thrilled about Ramon and Mariano's new direction, but the updates from Los Angeles changed their perspective. It was time to leave behind their familiar comforts and embrace the wild energy of a young, vibrant Los Angeles. In the fall of 1917, the Sano family set off to join the brothers. Their train journey from Durango to El Paso was grim, marred by the sight of bodies hanging from telephone poles, a chilling reminder of the violence that plagued northern Mexico. Despite the dangers, they arrived safely in El Paso in November 1917, while Ramon and Mariano had already reached Los Angeles the previous Thanksgiving. Initially, they stayed with their uncle, Dr. Jose Sano, living about 2 miles west of downtown Los Angeles. The brothers remained there until sometime in 1917. The early days in Los Angeles proved financially tough, especially for Ramon, who, despite his parents' disapproval, set aside his opera ambitions to pursue a career in film. Upon arrival, getting into the movie studios was relatively easy due to lax security, but landing a job was another story altogether. Ramon, with his dark hair and striking brown eyes, faced fierce competition for roles. He remembered feeling disheartened, almost losing hope. However, he finally caught a break with a minor role as an extra, which gave him a glimmer of optimism, only for him to soon realize that the struggle was far from over. Months passed before another opportunity arose, and he found himself back in financial hardship. When work did come, it often meant grueling hours on set, from dawn until dusk, without overtime pay. Despite these challenges and the slim chances of being cast in bigger roles, Ramon viewed this as his gateway into the industry. His on-screen debut came in the 1917 film The Jaguar's Claws, where he played a Mexican bandit in a scene shot in the Mojave Desert. Excited about his supposed big break, Ramon tried to steal the spotlight during a key moment, but his efforts fell flat with the director, Marshall Nealon, who promptly removed him from the scene. In that year, Ramon took on small roles, portraying a German soldier in The Little American alongside Mary Pickford and an Aztec warrior in Cecil B. DeMille's The Woman God Forgot. With limited opportunities as an extra and bit part actor, he sought alternative ways to earn a living. He worked as a grocery clerk and a busboy at the Victor Hugo restaurant, a popular spot for Hollywood stars. Interestingly, Ramon also found a more unconventional source of income by posing nude for art students at the Frank J. Smith School of Illustration and Painting. At a time when nude modeling was often viewed as scandalous, this choice raised eyebrows, especially since he had once considered a life in the priesthood. However, he viewed himself as an artist and believed that artists were not confined by traditional moral boundaries. In the summer of 1918, Ramon's luck took a turn that would significantly impact his career. Choreographer Marion Morgan, known for her innovative dances inspired by history and mythology, was searching for a male dancer. Her performances graced high-end vaudeville theaters and often served as opening acts for major films. She specifically sought someone unlikely to be drafted into World War I. During a local theater production, she spotted Ramon and seemingly chose him for his looks for the ballet Attila and the Huns. Despite standing at just 5 feet 6 inches, his Mexican heritage, which exempted him from the draft, likely influenced her decision. While other young men in Hollywood were being sent off to war, Ramon was about to seize a major opportunity, not in Los Angeles, but in New York City. By August, Ramon had left his family home for New York to begin rehearsals for Attila. Without any income from the rehearsals, he took a night job at the Horn and Hardart Automat on Broadway, earning $1.6 per shift as a pastry boy. Juggling his dreams of show business with the need to pay the bills left him physically drained and with sore feet, which affected his dance rehearsals. This struggle led to his initial dismissal, but he was quickly rehired after his replacement performed even worse. Ramon's resilience shone through, and by early autumn, he joined the Attila and the Huns ensemble for a tour across the Orpheum Theater circuit in the northern United States and Canada. Doris Perdue, a slender brunette and one of Ramon's regular dance partners, developed romantic feelings for him. However, Ramon's heart lay elsewhere. Under Emperor Maximilian's rule, the Code of Napoleon had decriminalized same-sex relationships in Mexico, but societal views remained largely unchanged. Effeminate men often faced police harassment, and accusations of homosexuality could still lead to imprisonment, regardless of the law. Many Mexicans were either unaware of or indifferent to the legality of same-sex relationships. While Los Angeles wasn't as overtly hostile towards homosexuals as Mexico, it still wasn't a friendly environment. Ramon needed time to fully understand and embrace his own sexuality, aware that few others would truly comprehend his journey. As Ramon tirelessly pursued his dreams in New York, disaster struck his family back in Los Angeles, threatening their future. One evening, while enjoying dinner with her family, 11-year-old Carmen accidentally left a candle burning in the attic. This small oversight ignited a devastating fire that engulfed their home. The Samaniego family rushed to salvage their possessions, but as the flames spread rapidly, they could only watch in despair as their memories turned to ash. Firefighters eventually extinguished the blaze, but the damage was extensive. Water from the hoses ruined many belongings, and looters took advantage of the chaos. With no place to call home, the Samaniegos chose to stay in Los Angeles, leaning on Dr. Sano's brother and the local Mexican community for support as they began to rebuild their lives. Meanwhile, Ramon returned to Los Angeles, eager to build on his recent success. By late 1920, he landed a role in Goldwyn's Mr. Barnes of New York, where he played the character Antonio Poli, a young man who meets a tragic end in a duel. Although it was a minor role, it was crucial to the film's revenge plot. However, any hopes Ramon had for instant fame faded when Goldwyn postponed the film's release. Likely due to an overflow of projects at the studio, by the summer of 1921, Ramon's luck turned around when he secured a part in Omar Khayyam. The female lead, 18-year-old Kathleen Key, had recently won a beauty contest, while the male lead was cast after director Ferdinand P. Earle's son came knocking at the door. In addition to acting, Ramon took on the responsibility of choreographing the film's dance sequences. Years later, he recalled how director Earle initially thought he was lacking in talent. Yet Earle persevered with the production. After filming wrapped, producer Theodore Arms took several reels without Earle's permission, criticized the film for being too artistic given its $65,000 budget, which was standard for the time, and edited it without Earle's involvement. This prompted Earle to seek legal action to block its release. Ramon later expressed disappointment that such a beautiful film might never see the light of day. In September 1922, more than a year after filming, a truncated version of the movie was shown. This experience opened Ramon's eyes to the potential pitfalls of filmmaking and how a project could easily derail. Luckily, his next role in The Prisoner of Zenda brought him much more recognition. Set in the enchanting land of Ruritania, the story weaves together themes of love, betrayal, courage, greed, mistaken identities, and thrilling sword fights. While making The Conquering Power in 1921, director Rex Ingram reportedly noticed Ramon among the extras and saw him as a potential replacement for the increasingly demanding Rudolph Valentino. Ingram supposedly aimed to make Ramon a star to teach Valentino a lesson about his own replaceability. However, years later, Ramon dismissed this tale as mere studio hype, clarifying that it was typical publicity nonsense. This marked a significant turning point for Ramon Novarro. With The Prisoner of Zenda emerging as a major release in 1922, Ramon seized the opportunity to carve out his niche as a leading man. Under the guidance of his mentor Ingram, he understood that failure could shut doors for him, but he found steadfast support from both the director and the lead actress. Yet, the road ahead was fraught with challenges. Ingram aimed to mold Novarro into a Valentino clone, even meticulously measuring the part in his hair to mirror the iconic star's look. Zenda resonated well with both critics and audiences, paving the way for new opportunities. During production, Ingram and his leading lady, Alice Terry, kindled a romance that culminated in a secret wedding one morning before returning to the set, effectively turning their work into a honeymoon. Meanwhile, Ramon forged a close friendship with Beryl Lazar, a prominent vamp of the silent film era. Just over a month after finishing Zenda, filming began for Ingram's Black Orchids, a reimagining of his earlier work, Grant White. Ingram noted that the original film had been murdered by the studio for being too risque, vowing to double the eroticism in this new project. Ramon took on dual roles as Yvonne de Maupin, the object of desire I, a suitor in a subplot. While his performance might not seem subtle by today's standards, it was notably more restrained compared to Valentino's, often conveying mischief rather than menace, which added a lighter flair to his character. Upon its debut at New York's Astor Theater, Trifling Woman, the eventual title for Black Orchids, despite Ingram's protests, received mixed reviews. The New York Times praised Ramon's portrayal of the romantic lead, yet other critics felt his performance fell short. Opinions on Ingram's direction were similarly split. Some recognized his unique vision, while others were less impressed. Filmmaker Michael Powell, a brilliant director in his own right, offered a more favorable view, describing the film's atmosphere as moonlight on tiger skins and blood dripping onto white faces, with sinister elements driving the plot forward. The film minimized intertitles, instead relying on its rich Gothic ambiance to convey emotion. Harrison deemed it a masterpiece, even as doubts lingered about Novarro's star potential. Although Trifling Woman didn't reach the blockbuster heights that Metro and Ingram had anticipated, some industry insiders began to see the promise in Ingram's protégé. Novarro revealed that Samuel Goldwyn hailed his work in The Prisoner of Zenda as the finest thing he had seen, leading to a lucrative 2-year contract worth $2,500 a week. Throughout this time, Novarro's personal life remained discreet. He kept his relationship with publicist Herbert Howe under wraps, and few suspected his sexuality. Studio executives, however, were often more astute about the private lives of their stars, yet with Novarro proving to be a box office draw, they worked hard to keep any scandals hidden. Driven by his ambition to succeed in film, he sought not only personal achievement, but also a way to ease his family's financial struggles. His hard work began to bear fruit with his upcoming project alongside Ingram, an ambitious adaptation of Raphael Sabatini's 1921 novel Scaramouche, a romance of the French Revolution. Although production was set to kick off on St. Patrick's Day, 1923, festivities reportedly delayed the start, as the Dublin-born Ingram indulged in 10 days of celebrations. What was supposed to wrap by midsummer extended into September, resulting in a hefty $858,000 cost that raised eyebrows at Metro, leading to worries about whether the film would recoup its expenses. By the end of that year, however, Scaramouche had earned a commendable 6th place in Film Daily's annual critics poll. When it premiered in February 1924, it became a significant box office hit. Although he received second billing after Alice Terry, Novarro shone as the film's star. By late 1923, just 2 years after stepping up from minor roles, Ramon Novarro had established himself among Hollywood's elite. His rapid rise was aided not only by his collaboration with one of cinema's top directors, but also by the lack of competition for the title of leading young male heartthrob. During this time, Ingram and Metro realized that casting Novarro solely as a stereotypical Latin lover didn't align with his true identity. They recognized that pigeonholing him as a mere imitation of Valentino would stifle his potential to create a unique space for himself in Hollywood. From this point forward, Novarro began shaping his own on-screen persona. As his fame soared, the public grew increasingly intrigued by his personal life. While the studio perpetuated the Hollywood fantasy by circulating rumors of romantic involvements with female stars, which were promptly denied, the truth was that Novarro was not married. Novarro preferred to keep his private life away from the spotlight, valuing his time with family at their home on Constant Street. Interestingly, his strong religious beliefs coexisted with his acceptance of his sexuality and unconventional views, enabling him to maintain a discreet yet fulfilling relationship with Howe. Novarro's next project with Ingram was The Arab, filmed in North Africa, during a period of tension between directors and studio heads, which strained Ingram's mental health. After returning to the U.S. in early 1924, the pressures of Hollywood led him to a nervous breakdown, prompting him to step back from the film industry and spend significant time in New York. Despite his exit, Ingram remained celebrated as one of Hollywood's finest directors, earning respect from silent film enthusiasts even today. Under Ingram's mentorship, Novarro had blossomed through 5 films, rising from obscurity to fame. However, with Ingram's departure from Hollywood, Novarro faced an uncertain future. He now had to navigate the shifting landscape of the industry and its politics without his trusted mentor. This transition not only represented a professional challenge for Novarro, but also a personal loss, as their friendship had been close. Some have speculated about a deeper relationship between them, but no definitive evidence of romance has ever surfaced. Novarro didn't linger on his worries for long. A major career milestone was just around the corner. Before The Prisoner of Zenda even premiered, some Hollywood insiders had already pegged him as the perfect choice for the lead in Ben-Hur. With Ingram no longer involved, it seemed like Novarro's shot at the lead role had slipped away. In a surprising twist, Goldwyn opted for the wholesome, athletic George Walsh instead of Novarro for the enigmatic character of Ben-Hur. As the situation spiraled, Goldwyn made a bold move by firing both the director and the lead actor, opting to start fresh with a new team. Then, on a Sunday in early June 1924, Novarro received a life-changing phone call from Irving Thalberg during lunch at the studio. He had been selected to play Ben-Hur. This news took Novarro by surprise, even though there had been whispers about significant changes to save the troubled film. Thalberg had two requests. First, he wanted Novarro to audition for the role immediately, but Novarro confidently suggested that Thalberg watch his performance in Where the Pavement Ends instead. Thalberg agreed. The second request involved Novarro temporarily suspending his studio contract, which meant no pay increase for Ben-Hur and covering his own expenses while filming overseas. Novarro accepted, but only if Herbert Howe could join him for public relations duties. Transitioning from shock to excitement, Novarro couldn't wait to share the thrilling news with Howe about their upcoming adventure in Italy. The very next day, a chauffeur whisked Novarro away to the Pasadena train station, where he began his covert journey to Europe. By then, Ben-Hur had morphed into a daunting beast, ready to overwhelm anyone involved in the production. As filming progressed under Fred Niblow's direction, Ben Reeves, known for his work on B-westerns and his equestrian skills, was brought in to oversee the preparations for the legendary chariot race. However, major hurdles remained, particularly due to the poor condition of the track. During one intense scene, Novarro miscalculated and crashed his chariot, which was then overturned by a herd of horses. Onlookers feared the worst, but he miraculously emerged unscathed. Frustration began to mount for Novarro, who was already unhappy with the slow pace of production and felt he was being treated unfairly by director Niblo and the crew. Before tackling the perilous chariot scenes, Novarro had already faced another risky stunt. In this sequence, he and his future Roman ally, Quintus Arrius, clung to a piece of wreckage at sea. Dressed only in minimal attire, Novarro and 75-year-old Frank Currier braved the frigid Mediterranean waters for 3 days. Although stand-ins were meant to take their place during setup and wide-angle shots, they called for help after just 20 minutes in the icy water. To make matters worse, Novarro was suffering from poisoning due to the toxic makeup used on set. In one particularly grueling scene, he endured being physically yanked by his hair 36 times, as assistant director E.L. Rabach demanded multiple takes. Eventually, Novarro had to show Rabach the clumps of hair falling out and refused to do another take. Director Niblow's reputation as a tough overseer grew. He pushed the actors, extras, and crew to their limits, while the studio remained indifferent to their struggles, focusing solely on managing the film's ever-increasing budget. From September to December, Thalberg's finances surged by almost $650,000, but the pressure of managing Ben-Hur took a toll on his health, resulting in a heart attack that many attributed to the stress. As the premiere approached, excitement buzzed in the air. Attendees were eager to see if the substantial investment of time, money, and effort would shine through in the final product. When Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ, graced the screen, it received polite applause. However, as the story unfolded, the sophisticated Broadway audience's enthusiasm grew, reaching a peak during the thrilling chariot race scene, which culminated in a thunderous standing ovation for the film and its creators. Interestingly, film star Novarro missed the premiere, citing a severe cold, but whispers suggested he might have been battling stage fright. Some speculated that his publicist, Herbert Howe, advised him to skip the event, arguing that a star in such a prominent role should maintain an air of mystery. The next day, New York's newspapers erupted with accolades for Ben-Hur, with the New York Times calling it perhaps the most significant spectacle ever filmed. Industry magazines like Photoplay went even further, declaring Ben-Hur a cinematic masterpiece that everyone must see. On October 8, 1927, the film debuted nationwide to packed theaters and garnered international acclaim, shattering box office records in cities around the world. Even years later, French poet and filmmaker Jean Cocteau lauded the film's lasting allure, referring to it as the epic par excellence. By early 1927, Novarro and Howe had enjoyed a relationship for over 3 years, often retreating to Beverly Hills to escape the constant presence of Howe's brother Milton and the Samaniegos family. While Howe officially served as Novarro's publicist, he wielded considerable power in the industry. His articles and photoplay could significantly influence an actor's career, and Novarro was receiving glowing coverage. The two were frequently seen together, which Howe casually dismissed, referring to Novarro as his closest friend and favorite travel companion. They also collaborated with the studio to concoct various stories about Novarro's romantic escapades with well-known women. In late January, the couple had planned a European vacation, but the unexpected death of Novarro's dear friend and co-star Barbara Lamar forced them to change course. Already in New York and preparing to depart, they canceled their trip and returned to California for her funeral, held at a chapel in Culver City. Afterward, a mourning Novarro continued his career, even more in demand following the untimely death of his rival, Rudolph Valentino, in 1926. The film Lovers premiered in New York on April 9, 1927, but only received mixed reviews. Following that, Novarro, whose salary had recently surged to $5,000 a week, began working on Romance, an adaptation of the 1903 novel by Joseph Conrad and Ford Madox Ford. But it too fell short of the success achieved by Ben-Hur, disappointing both critics and audiences. Meanwhile, Novarro's contemporaries at MGM, including Lon Chaney, John Gilbert, and rising star William Haynes, were racking up hits like Mr. Wu, Tell It to the Marines, Flesh and the Devil, and Love and Laughter, each film bringing in over $1 million worldwide and narrowing the gap in star power. Although Novarro's career wasn't in freefall, it certainly wasn't soaring after the triumph of Ben-Hur, as he had hoped. Compounding his professional worries was the film industry's swift shift to sound films. Despite having a remarkable voice, Novarro faced anxiety about how actors with distinct accents would fare in the era of talkies. His personal life also took a hit when he ended his secret relationship with Howe in 1928, prompting a bitter Howe to change his tone in articles about Novarro, even describing him as a theater with the lights out off-screen. During this chaotic time, Novarro's brother Jose had been bedridden for an entire year. By early 1929, he needed round-the-clock medical attention, but sadly, it wasn't enough. Jose passed away on February 22, 1929, at just 23 years old, with his death linked to complications from a previous football injury. Devastated by the loss, Novarro felt compelled to leave Hollywood behind and pursue the priesthood at El Retiro, but his attempts were met with rejection. Given his recent role as a barely clothed Jewish movie idol, which caused quite a stir among female audiences, it wasn't surprising that the clergymen weren't eager to welcome him into their ranks. Despite his personal tragedy, Novarro experienced a career revival on February 9, 1929, with the release of The Flying Fleet, originally titled Gold Braids. This film earned him the highest accolades he'd received since his work in Ben-Hur. Still, instead of riding the wave of success, he chose to defy his studio and fans by pursuing a long-held dream of performing on the opera stage in Europe. People warned him he was jeopardizing his acting career, but he was resolute in his desire to make it as a singer there. Unfortunately, his European venture turned into a disaster. He ended up failing to make his anticipated debut. To make matters worse, he was constantly besieged by the pressures of fame. With the lure of the priesthood and the operatic stage just out of reach, Novarro sought solace in alcohol. It's unclear exactly when his casual drinking crossed the line into dependency, but it likely began during this turbulent phase. Known for his fondness for a drink, he once humorously noted in a column that he was quite skilled at mixing cocktails. As Novarro navigated the twists and turns of his personal and professional life, his social calendar became increasingly full, likely contributing to his rising alcohol intake. While there were times he achieved sobriety, particularly when diving into new projects, alcohol remained a significant challenge for him throughout his life. MGM's strategy to ease him into sound films saw him cast in Devil May Care, where his vocal talents could shine. His singing had previously been well received in The Pagan. The film's marketing dubbed him the golden voice of the silver screen, assuring viewers they would enjoy both his speaking and singing. At 30, Novarro often drew comparisons to Maurice Chevalier, a French actor 10 years his senior. His charm and talent helped propel Devil May Care to over $1 million in international earnings, becoming one of his biggest hits. As he ventured into more speaking roles, he gained popularity among the gay community. To deflect any speculation about his personal life, he frequently appeared alongside female companions like Elsie Janis or Alice Terry, who helped maintain the facade during his public outings. At the close of 1930, Ramon Novarro made his return to MGM, stepping into the spotlight for a film adaptation of Arthur Schnitzler's dark novel Daybreak. Originally, the project aimed to be a musical featuring compositions by Oscar Strauss. However, as musical films began to fall out of favor, the decision was made to strip the movie of all its songs. Unfortunately, Daybreak flopped at the box office, facing harsh criticism. Many pointed to Novarro's portrayal of a distant Austrian officer, a stark contrast to the passionate roles that had endeared him to his fans, as a factor in its poor reception. In contrast, Maharani emerged as a massive success, becoming one of the year's biggest hits. Greta Garbo in the lead role mesmerized audiences, but it was the film's unexpected financial triumph that truly benefited Novarro. The buzz surrounding the two major stars in the studio fueled rumors of a steamy off-screen romance, helping Maharani gross over $2 million worldwide. However, Novarro's reign at MGM was short-lived. By August 1932, amid challenging economic conditions, Louis Burt Mayer requested Novarro and other stars to accept pay cuts, as the studio's profits had plummeted to levels not seen since 1925. While many actors faced this request, big names like Gable, Garbo, and Shutter were exempt. This indicated that Novarro's days as MGM's leading man were numbered, with salary cuts targeted at those whose box office appeal was waning. His next project, The Barbarian, co-starring Myrna Loy, was one of the last films produced before the enforcement of the Motion Picture Production Code. However, the new code led to widespread bans on The Barbarian due to Myrna's revealing attire in the film. Opportunities continued for Novarro into spring 1933, as MGM prepared to launch his first musical in 3 years, The Cat and the Fiddle. This film adapted the 1931 operetta by Jerome Kern and Otto Harbach, weaving a story of romantic entanglements in the European music scene. After wrapping up The Cat and the Fiddle, Novarro transitioned to Laughing Boy in 1934, starring alongside fellow Mexican actress Lupe Velez. Unfortunately, this film also faced censorship challenges. Joseph Breen from the Hays office deemed Laughing Boy inappropriate for audiences. In the end, critics harshly panned the film, particularly targeting Novarro's aging appearance, which many attributed to his growing alcohol consumption. Yet, the burden of increased censorship was minor compared to the looming threat of the emerging communist blacklists. A police operation at the headquarters of the CNR revealed names such as Novarro, Dolores Del Rio, Lupe Velez, and James Cagney, suggesting their potential ties to communism. McAllister even proposed legal measures to penalize those involved without a jury trial. The actors involved strongly denied the accusations against them. Cagney, for instance, categorically rejected any claims of supporting communist causes, implying that McAllister was exploiting the situation for his own publicity at the expense of their reputations. It appeared that the stars had been innocently approached for donations to help hungry farm workers, unaware of the union's communist connections. Now, both sides seemed eager to use their fame for political gain. Lupe Velez, embodying her fiery hot tamale persona, played coy when asked about communism, responding with a rhetorical, "What's a communist?" But this feigned ignorance came at a perilous time. Even casual associations with political radicals could lead to serious consequences. The Night is Young marked the end of Novarro's tenure with MGM. Although there were initial plans to cast him alongside Jeanette MacDonald or Evelyn Leigh in Love While You May, the studio had grown weary of him. Novarro faced Eddie the Fixer Mannix and was bluntly informed that MGM was terminating his contract, effectively ending his career. Novarro accepted this reality. On January 3, 1935, he departed MGM with a severance package of $199,000. The public learned of this change on February 7, the day after Novarro turned 36 and a few weeks after the release of The Night is Young. Interestingly, contrary to some film historians' claims, Novarro's decline in Hollywood wasn't primarily due to homophobia or waning interest in exotic leading men. Rumors suggested his departure stemmed from scandalous revelations or ultimatums from studio head Louis Burt Mayer demanding he marry, but these theories lack solid evidence. Marriage alone likely wouldn't have salvaged Novarro's recent films, which had suffered a staggering $760,000 loss. His ambitions in opera and a desire for a religious life distracted him from pursuing better roles and collaborations. He missed out on potential projects with internationally beloved stars like Garbo or MacDonald that could have revitalized his career. For example, he might have been a great fit for the role of the Spanish ambassador to Queen Christina, which Garbo could have supported over John Gilbert. Similarly, he could have starred in The Merry Widow, but his lack of focus and struggles with alcohol led to missed opportunities. Mayer and Thalberg's puzzling casting choices also hindered Novarro's career, often placing him in ill-suited roles. They claimed to select his parts with care, but this didn't always translate into wise decisions. For instance, A Certain Young Man was a poor follow-up to Ben-Hur, and disappointing films like Huddle, The Mahari, and Laughing Boy followed The Cat and the Fiddle. Projects such as Daughter of the Sun and Son of India further eroded Novarro's appeal both at home and abroad. If MGM executives had recognized that Novarro's charm as a leading man thrived in light romantic roles, his journey with the studio might not have ended in 1935. When we examine Novarro's career, it's crucial to consider the context of his time. He was the last of the original stars from Metro Pictures to fade from the limelight. Over nearly 11 years, he appeared in 22 films, including a massive blockbuster, raking in over $31 million for MGM, a figure that only Joan Crawford surpassed with her 36 films. Yet, it would be a long 15 years before he stepped back onto an MGM soundstage. He maintained a brave front, expressing to reporters that this transition marked a time of wisdom and happiness. However, beneath that calm exterior, Novarro was anxious about his future. After over a decade of stardom, he faced an uncertain path ahead. Although he was financially secure and had fewer responsibilities towards his now adult siblings, he felt the absence of the steady income MGM had provided. The stark truth was that his star was fading. At 36, he found himself on the fringes of Hollywood success. Calls from friends and film offers had dried up, and the few roles available didn't appeal to him. He continued to seek scripts that could revive his career, even aiming for a role in 20th Century Fox's The Rains, which ultimately went to Tyrone Power. While Hollywood's interest in him waned, regional theaters were eager to hire him, offering a weekly salary of $200, much less than his MGM days, but comparable to what theatrical icons like Ethel Barrymore and Ina Claire earned. Although he found work in a summer stock theater, this supposed period of wisdom and happiness didn't curb his drinking. Novarro often drove under the influence, resulting in several car accidents. Sadly, these incidents didn't prompt him to reassess his relationship with alcohol. Instead, they exacerbated it. His deep Catholic faith clashed with his sexuality, creating overwhelming guilt that drove him to drink even more. he would often find himself driving around Los Angeles, seeking out men in well-known spots, all while grappling with guilt and uncertainty. To muster the courage to approach these encounters, he drank even more, leading to further crashes. The most severe of these accidents required an emergency intervention from a doctor who just happened to be nearby. In a letter, Novarro recounted how the doctor saved his life by pulling him from the wreckage, administering alcohol both orally and via injection, and dislodging his tongue, all quick-thinking actions that he credited with his survival. The accident left him in the hospital for 2.5 weeks, nursing a concussion, 2 broken ribs, a severely bruised chest, a cut on his chin, and a dislocated ankle that needed 6 weeks in a cast. Interestingly, Novarro seemed more concerned about his own well-being than that of the other driver, who was also injured. This man, known for his generosity, displayed a troubling self-centeredness when it came to avoiding blame. Despite facing legal troubles and the disappointment of his family and friends, he struggled to take responsibility for his actions. Authorities repeatedly found him guilty of reckless driving, and his family felt deep shame over his drunk driving arrests. Novarro recognized the seriousness of his addiction and his struggle to overcome it. This cycle of guilt over his sexuality and drinking habits created a repetitive loop of devout abstinence, followed by relapses into alcohol and sexual encounters. In the early 1940s, he became involved with a much younger man, Don Atkins, and generously provided him with a house in Hollywood. Don later remarked that by this time, Novarro resembled a more compassionate male version of Norma Desmond from Sunset Boulevard. Atkins shared a story from October 1941, recalling a night when Novarro found himself too drunk to drive and ended up spending the night in jail. After contacting his lawyer, he managed to secure his release by posting a $50 bail. One particularly humiliating moment occurred in London when he was laughed off the stage during the opening of The Prisoner of Zenda. By the 1950s, Novarro began to embrace a life of solitude. This shift from his previously vibrant social life, combined with his frequent interactions with clergy at the Pala Assistencia and visits to Catholic retreats, sparked rumors that he might be considering a monastic lifestyle. However, his aspirations never came to fruition, partly because he was now deemed too old to join any religious order. In his early 50s, Novarro's youthful charm had faded, and he struggled to connect with a younger generation that barely remembered his heyday. The allure he once held for young men had diminished, leading to a life where his only sexual encounters were transactional. Despite his reckless behavior, which included driving drunk around Hollywood in search of companionship, he managed to evade major public scandals, perhaps through sheer luck. Novarro wasn't entirely ready to abandon his career. During this period, he enlisted the help of the infamous beauty guru Madame Sylvia, who would later publish a scandalous autobiography revealing secrets about various movie stars. Among her claims about Novarro was the bizarre notion that he slept in a coffin, a replica of one he had seen in the Vatican. Whether there was any truth to this is unclear, but it wouldn't be surprising if he owned one. Madame Sylvia's treatments were notorious for being brutal. She would literally squeeze the fat off her clients, often finishing with a minor beating. Despite the questionable methods, Novarro did manage to land one last role in Heller in Pink Tights. Although the Los Angeles Times announced a potential role opposite Salmoneo in a remake of The Pagans in 1959, that project, along with several others, ultimately fell through due to production issues or disputes over Novarro's salary. As his acting career dwindled, Novarro's battle with alcohol continued. In May 1960, he faced 2 arrests for drunk driving within just 2 days. His trial in June resulted in a deadlock on the misdemeanor charge, but he still received a $250 fine for driving under the influence of non-narcotic substances. On February 20, 1962, nearly 2 years after his last drunk driving arrest, and just 2 weeks after turning 63, Novarro was involved in a serious car accident. He ran a red light in Sun Valley, crashing into another vehicle. He was arrested for the fourth time in over 3 years. During this incident, he reportedly told the officers that he was old and wanted to die, a statement that drew significant media attention. Despite his long-gone fame, Novarro received an unexpected wave of sympathy from around the world. Letters and telegrams poured in from as far away as Ghana and Pakistan, with some urging him not to give up on life. Joan Crawford reached out to offer her support during his difficult times. One fan made a heartfelt request. If Novarro was still contemplating death, she asked him to call her to collect and sing Pagan Love Song one last time. By this time, Novarro's health had deteriorated significantly, with diagnoses of cirrhosis of the liver and a blood clotting disorder, likely a result of years of alcohol abuse, leaving him with visible bruises on his skin. In January 1963, after years of smoking, he faced serious health issues, including empyema and heart problems, which left him gasping for breath. The looming threat of jail time hung over him like a dark cloud, intensifying his anxiety. He felt like a nervous wreck. Just when things seemed to spiral further, he received devastating news. Herbert Howe, who had briefly returned as his publicist, passed away on October 23, 1966. Howe's health had deteriorated rapidly after a fall, and he succumbed to chronic cardiovascular issues at the age of 66. His death barely made a ripple in the media, a stark contrast to the vibrant career he once enjoyed. A particularly active period emerged in the latter half of 1968, when Novarro, often so drunk his handwriting became nearly unreadable, wrote around 140 checks, typically ranging from $20 to $40. Most of these checks went to a group of so-called gardeners and escorts from a place called Missouri the Best, located on Fountain Avenue in Hollywood. Not every meeting turned sexual. Sometimes, he was too inebriated to engage, opting instead to wander around naked or enjoy non-sexual contact, while his guests watched TV until he eventually dozed off. However, dozing off drunk and naked with nearby strangers posed risks. Generally, his companions seemed trustworthy, but he did experience theft a couple of times, prompting him to stop keeping large sums of cash at home. Occasionally, he would even promise to help younger visitors break into acting, though this was likely a fantasy, as he struggled to re-establish his own career. Despite some encounters turning aggressive, a friend remarked on Novarro's reckless lifestyle, suggesting he had a death wish, a painfully accurate observation. Amid Hollywood's indifference, Novarro maintained a dedicated fan base in England. On October 19, 1968, the Ramon Novarro Film Club celebrated its 500th meeting. Novarro longed to attend the event in London, but was held back by his declining health. Instead, he received a congratulatory call from club members. This milestone came just a year after homosexuality was decriminalized in England, a change that wouldn't occur in California until 1976. In the days that followed, Novarro's routine consisted of attending daily mass, collecting unemployment benefits, tending to his garden, and indulging in heavy drinking. A neighbor noticed that he seemed to drink more as Halloween approached, though the reasons remained unclear, evident in his appearance and demeanor while handing out treats. On October 30, a young man Novarro had never met reached out after a brief conversation about his looks. Novarro invited the young escort over for drinks. The caller promised to arrive with his younger brother around 5:30 p.m. As he prepared for their arrival, Novarro remained blissfully unaware that these would be the last guests he would ever welcome into his home. On the morning of October 31st, Halloween, Edward Weber arrived at work at 3110 Laurel Canyon. He found the iron gates wide open, but the front door locked, prompting him to enter through the kitchen. The living room was a chaotic mess, with furniture overturned and a pair of glasses shattered on the floor. After calling out for Ramon and receiving no answer, Weber checked the master bedroom and bathroom, but discovered Novarro was nowhere to be found. Just when he thought his search was in vain, a beam of sunlight illuminated Novarro's body on the bed, revealing signs of a brutal beating. Alarmed, Weber called the police, who swiftly arrived with over 20 officers to secure the scene. The investigation uncovered a half-eaten meal in the kitchen and a collection of empty liquor bottles in the backyard. Among the evidence were a broken tooth, blood samples, and a careful examination of Novarro's injuries. His hands and ankles were bound with an electric cord, and an initial, either an N or Z, was carved into his neck. Novarro's body showed numerous injuries and bruises, and a broken silver-tipped cane, a keepsake from his film career, lay across his thigh. When his brothers arrived to identify him, one expressed disbelief over the sudden tragedy, recalling that Novarro had seemed in good spirits just days earlier. The scene revealed no signs of forced entry or clear motive, leaving the police with few leads, except for blood-stained clothing found nearby. Nevertheless, detectives plunged into the investigation, eager to uncover the truth. Had Novarro's death been natural, it might have slipped under the radar, but the violent nature of his murder catapulted it into the spotlight, with major newspapers detailing the tragic end of the once-celebrated film star and the mysteries surrounding his untimely demise. As news coverage ramped up, it revisited Novarro's illustrious career, highlighting his iconic role as Judah Ben-Hur and his memorable collaborations with Greta Garbo. Friends and acquaintances expressed their shock and sadness over the loss of such a kind and sophisticated individual. By November 2nd, just 3 days after Novarro's body was discovered, police revealed grim details. The murder likely occurred between 9 and 9:30 p.m. on October 30th, and the absence of forced entry suggested that Novarro had willingly let his assailant in. Surprisingly, nothing appeared to have been stolen. Digging deeper into Novarro's financial activities revealed over 100 checks written to various gardeners and landscapers in recent months, hinting at his sexuality and changing the direction of the investigation. This revelation shocked many, including his family, who had no idea he was gay or involved with young men. Among those gardeners, Larry Ortega, linked to an escort service, emerged as a key figure. Further inquiries led investigators to a jail inmate who knew Ortega and his associates, exposing a network involved in sexual exchanges and pointing to a volatile individual connected to Ortega. Paul Ferguson, along with his brother Tom. With this lead, authorities began surveillance at Ortega's family home. Meanwhile, examining Novarro's phone records revealed a call to Chicago on the night of the murder, connecting the case to Tom Ferguson in Los Angeles and prompting a deeper investigation into the Ferguson brothers. This inquiry uncovered a history of minor criminal activities and aggressive behavior. Fingerprint analysis soon tied the Ferguson brothers to the crime scene, resulting in their arrest. Paul Ferguson faced charges of murder and robbery without bail, while Tom, being a minor, was detained in juvenile hall, where he reportedly bragged about his involvement in Novarro's death. The events of that night remain unclear, as the brothers provided conflicting accounts. Paul Ferguson claimed he had fallen asleep and was awakened by Tom, who informed him that Novarro had died. In contrast, Tom offered a more detailed and seemingly credible narrative. He recounted watching as his older brother attacked Novarro on the bed, repeatedly demanding money they believed Novarro kept at home. Since Novarro was not known to have large sums of cash, he couldn't provide anything. Tom eventually retreated from the room while Paul continued the assault, inflicting further harm on Novarro, including in sensitive areas, before attempting to erase their traces. They left behind notes implicating Larry Ortega, hoping to shift blame onto him. Additionally, they scribbled messages around the house intended to suggest that Novarro had met female sex workers that night, framing them as responsible. In their haste, they stole some of Novarro's clothes, donned them, and discarded their own bloodied garments nearby. Ultimately, aside from the clothes, all they took was a $20 bill found in Novarro's pocket. A scandalous rumor has become a part of Hollywood lore, but it appears to be nothing more than a fabrication. The rumor claimed that police concealed the truth about Paul Ferguson torturing Novarro to death using an Art Deco sex toy, allegedly once owned by Novarro's secret lover, Rudolph Valentino. Supposedly, Novarro kept this item in a shrine dedicated to Valentino at his home. However, the reality is far less sensational. The two men only met once, and there's scant evidence to suggest that Valentino was gay or bisexual. The truth reveals a grim and violent end for the beloved star, who tragically died after being severely beaten by Ferguson. This incident took place just before Halloween, mere weeks before the Manson murders sent shockwaves through Hollywood. It felt like a significant turning point, marking the end of an old era and the dawn of a new, more liberated yet perilous one. On December 17th, a grand jury in Los Angeles examined the case against Paul and Tom Ferguson, who faced accusations of murdering Novarro during a botched robbery. They were reportedly after $5,000 that was rumored to be hidden in Novarro's home. Under California law, any death resulting from robbery or torture qualifies as first-degree murder, regardless of the perpetrator's direct involvement. Even though Tom was underage, he was tried as an adult. Eventually, both brothers were convicted and served time for Novarro's murder, but they were paroled in the mid-1970s. They later found themselves back in prison for different crimes, serving longer sentences than they had for Novarro's killing. In a later interview, Paul Ferguson took responsibility for the crime, while Tom tragically took his own life in 2005, and Paul passed away in prison in 2018. Novarro now rests in Calvary Cemetery in East Los Angeles, and his legacy endures with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 635 Hollywood Boulevard. His story is one of the most dramatic and captivating of any early film star. From escaping a revolution and overcoming poverty to becoming an international icon, Novarro experienced it all. His battles with addiction, spirituality, and sexuality shaped significant parts of his life, yet his humor, talent, and success shone brightly for his fans, both then and now. Thus, this episode ends here. See you next time.